So let's look at a, so we'll start with the ViPR itself. As the user logs in, there's a, let me see if I can maximize this and make it a little more palatable. Oh, that's a little better. Okay. So as user logs in, right, they're presented with a service catalog. These are higher level categories. There's 16 categories total. Right, so I can scroll over, show you more. Underneath of each category, there's let's just expand one of them. Let's say block services. Again, there's another half a dozen different services. You can see them: the create volume, export volume, remove volume, change the virtual pool, etc. What's underneath, right? How the services are built. Let's dive deep inside the ViPR administration. So I'm going to switch my role to an admin role and a so as you can see here, in my environment, I have 13 storage systems already ingested and discovered. One SMS provider, a couple of fabric managers, the Brocades and Cisco MDSs, one data protection system, one vcenter cluster, and a number of hosts, right? As you can see, I also have my...
What's a data protection system? Data domain?
Recover point.
Oh, recover point. Replication.
Yes. And as you can see here, ViPR controller monitors all the components of the virtual appliance. So here's my ViPR controller, and here's my data services VM as well. So let's take a look at the physical storage infrastructure that ViPR discovered and managed. So I'm going to click on the physical assets. There's several different tabs that manage just conceptually different storage components. My storage systems, you can see here I have a number of VNXs, block systems, in Isilon, a NetApp, and several VMAXs. I also have on my page 2, I have a vPlex discovered as well. Right, you can see that last one in a row. To discover the storage system, I can either associate it with SMIS provider. So I can go and discover the SMIS provider, and it will tell me all it knows about all the storage system and controls. Or I can go and communicate with them directly. Let's pick the NetApp here. As you can see, all I need to do is to give it an IP address and credentials to discover. My SMIS, again, for a SMIS provider, all I need to do is to give it an IP address and credentials. It returns everything it knows about any storage system that it manages. For fabric managers, similarly, I have two in my environment, a Brocade and a Cisco. A Brocade is discovered through its SMIS provider. Cisco is discovered directly through the API. Again, data protection system, here's my recover point. Discovered directly by connecting through the API to it using its IP and credentials. Let's take a look at the vCenters. I have a single vCenter instance. If I scroll over to the right, you will be able to see its associated hosts, right? So, and if I look at the cluster, its associated cluster, if I click on the clusters, I have a couple of clusters discovered here. One for the VMware cluster, the other one is for the Hyper-V. And each of the clusters have a little button there that shows its host over here. Similarly, I can go back to my hosts menu. And just to give you an idea, for the hosts we discover, depending on operating system, we discover their IP address, their the storage connectivity types, whether it's a fiber channel or iSCSI or regular mounted IP file systems, and their initiator. So if I scroll over to the right, you will see a button that basically gives me the initiators for each host. So that's the right. That's why when we discover the host, it's important to actually specify the operating system, because the initiator discovery is different depending on the technology. Now, that's all fine and dandy, but let's talk about the real interesting stuff, right? So if I go back to my storage system, let's pick one, let's say one VNX. If I click on it, it gives me all its physical pools, right? These are the two physical pools discovered to discover the storage system. What it also gives me, see the drive types and the resource of whether this pool is thin or thick provisioning. Similarly, it gives me all its fiber channel ports, right? And here's a list of fiber channel ports, all the service providers there.
I have a question on the previous slide. There were two pools, and the first pool didn't have the drive type behind it. Why is that?
Let me go back for a second.
Nice shot. You broke the demo.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
Right.
So on.
Looks like the root file system on a VMS box.
So that's a good question.
Yeah, it's a Clarion.
So
that's a good enough answer.
Yeah.
no, well, the answer is actually simple, right? SMIS provider did not pull the data from the array, and we're getting that from the SMIS provider. So what that means is that whatever default policies applied to that array will, if nothing else specified in terms of the drive types, it will default to those unknown drive types.
Okay.
So on top of this physical pools, what I've done is I've built several virtual instances, right? So here's my two virtual arrays, 1 and 2, very simple. The reason I didn't name them geographically, like the Boston or San Francisco or Hopkinton or New York, is that they're really logical constructs. They're not tied to a geographical location. They're not tied to any specific storage system. If let's look at any of the arrays here, you will see that it has a number of storage systems assigned to it. And the storage systems selected by using really a storage admin preferences. I could have picked different storage systems. I could have picked them based on a vendor, based on the type, or bulk everything together. So as you can see, this virtual storage array has both Isilon and NetApps. It has a 1, 2, 3, so 5 vMaxes and 1 vPlex and a 3, I think, 4 VNXs. Right. My other virtual storage array may or may not have different physical storage systems. They can overlap just as easily. So, for example, if I look at this virtual storage array, again, you can see that it's the same Isilon, same NetApp. So it's many-to-many relationship between the virtual storage array and the physical storage systems underneath.
You know, I would have thought the virtual arrays would have been like protocol kind of boundaries, and they're not, because you got EMC, Isilon, and Symmetrics, and
they can be. However, what I've done is
have to be.
But virtual pool probably would be a better logical construct to aggregate them by protocol
Than virtual arrays.
So, and that gives me a good segue. So let's take a look at virtual pools.
Okay. So, and I understand the function of a virtual pool. What's the purpose of a virtual array?
Think about it as a metering mechanism. So it's easier to control arrays in a geographical location or managed by a single departmental group or charged back to a customer. So
it's an administrative boundary.
Absolutely. That's the main purpose of it, right? The storage administration from in terms of the vendor support.
Again, the terminology is a little confusing because it's not really a virtual array.
I hear what you're saying. Right. So it's more of it's a logical array, right?
It's a container.
It's a logical container, right?
Yeah.
Logical construct, exactly.
Yeah.
So, all right, take a look at the virtual storage pools. They don't have to be defined like I did here, but I think that gives you a good representation of what the virtual storage pools can be constructed.
Yeah, and
Right.
and having multiple protocols in the same pool would really create problems.
That's correct. However, we enable administrators to do that. So,
Yeah, you
just
can't.
as
There's no good reason to prevent people from being stupid.
true enough, true enough. But you can see here that following your example, I separated the fiber channel versus iSCSI, right, for block pool. So I have my iSCSI pool, I have my block pool. I also have two levels of a performance, my gold block and my regular block pool. Just as easily, I could have created multiple performance levels for file pool, right? Isilon is way more, is way faster, way better performing system than NetApp.
Okay, so if I am foolish
Okay.
and I put,
I don't believe for a second that you are, but
you don't know me very well. But if I am foolish and I put multiple resources in a virtual pool,
okay,
some of which are accessible to host A and some of which are inaccessible to host A,
correct.
whether it's because they're different protocols or different fabrics or
Yes, yeah, that's okay.
it's smart enough when I say give host A LUN from this pool to pick systems that are accessible from that host, or do I have to be smart enough to create my pools that way?
So the answer is it is smart enough, yes.
Okay.
So what it does, it actually looks, and when we go through a service in a moment, you will see that service is constrained by the drop-down menus. And in the list of the drop-down menu list, the host that is not part of that virtual storage pool does not have access to that array or that storage resource, or is not part of that logical project, will not even appear on the list.
Okay. Oh, so there's another layer.
There's
the
another
project.
Well, of course, we support multi-tenancy, right? And
Sorry,
yes, sir.
what does it mean SRDF pool? Because you have SRDF is configured to protect. You can configure SRDF to protect LANs, not a pool of storage. No.
You're correct. SRDF is a technology that is specific to the vMAX.
No. Okay.
Right? So I simply constructed it as an example to show that, yes, we support SRDF protection for vMAXs. And
It's being done at the lower level, though, right?
yeah, yes and no. So the protection itself is done at the lower level in the vMAX, correct. But what I've done is I've identified and isolated the vMAXs with SRDF capabilities into this pool.
So you configure. So if I provide a LAN within the pool, so automatically I get the replication
yes,
somewhere, but where?
You get automatic synchronous replication to a target pool. So let's take a look at this. That's actually an interesting question.
Enrico, that's just a name. He could have named it Joe Pool or whatever.
Right, but
No.
but that
The
pool only
intention is
contains
be
resources.
protected and replicated and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
but
Yeah,
that's,
the
you know,
Data that
but
goes into
was-
that pool is replicated.
right.
So
Yeah,
that
but
pool is
these are just
replicated.
these are just hints to consumers, correct? Consumers of this pool that it is using SRDF at a lower level. It
Yeah,
could
right,
be named whatever you want.
Yeah, you could have.
So-
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean,
right.
it's protected, replicated storage.
Right, but it is the name. I picked the name to showcase the level of protection that the storage systems aggregated under this pool.
I do the same
offer.
thing when I'm naming my data stores and things like that. I name them with hints as to what's going on underneath. so that,
Absolutely,
you know,
right. So, and if you look here, right, this virtual pool, I'm using thin provisioning, block storage. I'm using one virtual array, number one. I could have used both. However, the way I configured it, my SRDF protected vMAXs are distributed through both virtual arrays. So I'm using fiber channel protocol and not iSCSI. And as I scroll down here, I think I'm going to have to do this. Scroll over and then.
So I mean, you could have technically been, and I'm say support Hitachi or something like that, but it could have been Hitachi storage with synchronous replication. It could have been NetApp storage with synchronous replication, IBM storage with synchronous replication.
That's right.
Couldn't it, it's not
it's
just
not
a
easy.
pure quote unquote SRDF vMAX pool. that we're talking about here.
Right, but the reason why I picked it up is that because I associated with the Vmax, right?
Yeah.
And once we support the HDS, HDS would have appeared in my drop-down menu here, right? Similarly, I have to, so let me scroll even further down. I've configured there it is. That's where I was getting it. So that's where my remote protection SRDF is configured. And I have actual several options there for remote protection availability. As you can see, I could have picked the recover point or my vplex local or remote. In this case, I picked SRDF. Okay. Specifically, I added SRDF copy that creates a replica, right, a continuous replica on a second virtual array. So that allows me to add additional level of protection by storing the copy of my data, not in my logical construct, for example, the virtual array 1, but sending it to parts of the virtual arrays that are kind of grouped under virtual array 2. If I had them distributed geographically, right, different corners of the building, different power grids, different PDUs, etc., right, that would have awarded me with a greater degree of disaster
virtual
recovery.
arrays have to be disjoint sets, so it can't. A particular array cannot be in multiple virtual arrays.
Yeah, they can.
Yes, it can. Yes, it can. It's a logical construct. It's just a logical construct.
So you could partition, for instance, an array.
I can partition an array, give it
virtual array 1 and half
right,
in virtual
exactly.
array 2.
And yeah, in a network, so when we looked at that, right, networks are based off ports. So I could have had half of the front-end directors on one array being in the virtual network associated with virtual array 1, the other half being in virtual array 2. That's simple. All right, so now we talked about physical discovery. We talked about physical storage pools. We talked about creating a virtual storage pools on top of that and the virtual storage arrays as a logical containers. Let's go ahead and actually see how it works in reality. Right? Before we do that, let me show you one more level of abstraction when we talked about a project, tenants and projects.
We are running a little bit late.
Okay, so this is actually going to take a second. As you can see here, you can create multiple projects and associate users through the integration with LDAP or Active Directories with these projects, and have different levels of approvals for different groups within the project. So let's go ahead and actually execute one of the services. I'm going to switch back to the user mode. And let's go ahead and we'll pick, how about the file services for VMware? We're going to create a VMware data store based on one of the file systems and export it to a cluster, right?
Why isn't there any integration with VMware vSphere within the vCenter web client?
Yes, there is, through the VCO, of course.
Okay, but not as a extra tab you can do within vCenter.
Our relationship with VMware is such that they have their own orchestration tools, right? They have a VCO and they have a VCAC. It was logically simpler to integrate with those orchestration tools than with the vSphere directly. Just to give you an idea.
Are you just looking for like a single pane of glass?
Yeah.
Sort of thing? Okay.
No, not that phrase.
Right, so, but just to give you an idea.
That's what he's looking for, you know? Call it what it is.
But you might be managing the storage at a higher level than your particular vCenter server or cluster.
Here,
right.
Come here. Come here.
So just to give you an idea, in the vCenter, in the vSphere client, right? I do have ability to manipulate data stores. Means we're sending the through vCenter Orchestrator, and as you can see here, there are workflows associated with EMC ViPR.
Okay.
We provide the plugins for VCO and VCAC, Hyper-V, and of course the integration with OpenStack Cinder. Right. So as you can see here, here's my data store that I'm going to create. Here's the vCenter that you already seen discovered. Within this data center, there's a fictitious company rainfall that I created, shared storage type, and here's where I can select a cluster and associate it with a virtual array. Let's pick virtual array 2, just for kicks. Right? Since it's going to be running on file, I'm selecting a file pool, which you've seen created, file virtual storage pool, and a project. You already seen that, let's say, an engineering project. All I need to do is specify the export name and a size of the data store. I'm just going to give it 1 GB so we don't waste any space. And that's it. And remember, there was a question about whether I can specify additional host as opposed to a cluster. I have a field there where I can enter any additional host that this data center will be exported to.
Can ViPR control services support something like snapshot or cloning and things
Yes.
of that nature?
Yes. Snapshot for the volumes. You're talking about snapshots for the VMs or at the storage level?
I mean at the LUN volume level and
Yes.
stuff like that.
There's actually a whole category of services that once it's finished, I can show you.
That's good, thanks.
Yep. So as you can see here, it's going through the execution steps. Now here's the quiz. What happens if, for whatever reason, the space is not available or the connectivity to data center, to the hosts or the vCenter is lost while the service is being provisioned?
You'd have to regress it.
I have to regress it all the way. Just think about the storage admin that has to do it manually. How many steps they have to undo in order to reclaim that storage, right? We have it successfully fulfilled in 31 seconds, and this is actually pretty slow. Dr. Murphy apparently playing his role. Usually it's about 10 to 14 seconds. But the point is that when it fails, it goes through all these execution steps, the 7 execution steps and 9 pre-check steps, and revert them one by one until the storage is absolutely clear and ready to be provisioned for something else.
So does that mean that you can also use this to do teardown?
To do, I'm sorry?
To tear things down. So it's say, I don't need that
yes,
anymore.
Yes, I can. Absolutely. So in my services categories, each service allows me both creation and deletion of anything that ViPR creates.
Yep.
Right. Cool. So just to make sure that that I'm not fooling around, I'm going back in my vCenter and then go back to the storage. Right, it's updating. It'll show me my newly created data center. Now, on top of that, I can now use my vCenter Orchestrator so my vCenter Orchestrator to expand it through use of the right-click menus. Or delete it. Remember we talked about the tearing down? So I can delete it, create a snapshot, etc. So with that, I think it's a good logical place for us to stop.
There was something on Twitter about people being able to use ViPR or try ViPR out. Is that?
That is correct. So there is a link on the EMC website that allows you to download the ViPR controller virtual appliance for free. Try it, install it in your environment, and then go from there.
There's a question on
data services as well.
It's far, no, it does not include data, so it's just a controller.
Question on the internet: is this just a VC? Is this a VCO plugin, or is it just native REST API calls?
Oh, this is a VCO plugin.
Okay, cool.
Right. So it's a if we have time, I can actually go in the vCenter and show you that additional workflows within that plugin. There's about 3 dozen different workflows.